Good morning, Ms. Norman. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Are you ready?
Yes, we're ready. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, maybe just before we proceed with the witness, we've just placed another presentation file before you, which is Exhibit CC1E. We will deal with it later, but this is the affidavit of Mr. Williams, which was submitted yesterday. Now it has been properly paginated. It has been placed before you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. May Mr. Sundaram be reminded that he's still under oath? Thank you.
Well, we have not been reminding
Anyone?
them, but he knows that he has taken an oath to give his evidence truthfully and honestly, and that applies until he has finished his evidence.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Before you start, Ms. Norman,
Yes.
I just want to. Yesterday, I referred to part of the evidence that was given by Mr. Themba Maseko
Yes.
before this commission when I noted Mr. Sundaram's evidence in his statement, excuse me, which was to the effect that I think Mr. Atul Gupta said that he could get any national or provincial minister to come to the breakfast briefings that they held. I said I seem to remember that Mr. Themba Maseko gave evidence to the effect that in his meeting with Mr. Ajay Gupta, Mr. Ajay Gupta told him that he or they, that is the Gupta family, could get any minister or could call any minister. I just want to, I think I did find the
reference.
The reference, and I just want to read it so that I don't misrepresent what Mr. Themba Maseko said. It is at paragraph 28 of his statement, which is at Exhibit E1, page 13 of Exhibit E1 before this commission. Before paragraph 28, Mr. Maseko deals with the fact that he explained to Mr. Ajay Gupta how things worked in regard to advertisement from the government side. Then he says at paragraph 27 and 28, he dismissed my explanation and proceeded to tell me that my job is to go and identify, collect, and allocate all the communication budget amounts in the various departments to his company. Paragraph 28, that was 27. Paragraph 28, he says, he, that is Mr. Ajay Gupta, then told me that I should let him know if any department or minister gives me any problems, and he would deal with them directly. I asked him to elaborate, and he told me that he will personally summon and deal with any minister who doesn't cooperate in this regard. Then he says, I then objected to the way he was talking about ministers in such derogatory terms. He seemed oblivious to the point I was making and emphasized that he could deal with any minister who didn't cooperate.
Yes.
So the part that I was interested in is the one where Mr. Masego said Mr. Ajay Gupta said he could personally summon and deal with any minister
Yes.
who didn't cooperate.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay. I just wanted to make
Yes,
sure
to
I'm not
place it on record, yes.
misrepresenting
No.
what Mr. Masego said.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thanks.
you,
We may
Mr.
proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Sundaram, will you please look at Exhibit CC1, A and B?
Yes,
We go back to your main statement again.
yes,
You've covered all of the evidence that is in paragraphs 1 right up to 17. And this morning, I would like to refer you to paragraph 18, where you deal with the SABC archive deal.
yes.
Yes. Could you just tell the chairperson what was your understanding of this deal?
I'm sorry, you referred to paragraph 18
Paragraph 18, 1-8
of his statement.
of his, yes, of his main statement.
Oh, okay.
It's got
Thank
a
you.
subheading.
Yeah,
You
I've
found
got
it.
it, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman sir, this was a deal that I got to know when I was in India, and Mr. Lakshmi Goyal said that they had a very sweet deal for archives, because that was one of my worries. When you set up a station, you need archives to start with. Otherwise, especially when you have an environment where you have rivals who've existed for many years, so they'd have a very robust archive. So that was one of my worries. So what Mr. Lakshmi Goyal said was that the Gupta brothers and Mr. Nazim Hoa have had a very sweet deal with the SABC, where about 100 hours of footage would be given at throwaway prices, what he described as peanuts, that we'd get that at peanuts. And he said one of my immediate priorities would be to hire an archivist, a professional archivist, who could take that footage, which was on analog with SABC, and convert it into a digital format. And he said that this should be done as soon as possible. That Nazim would have the editorial team from the TNA sit down and make a list of all the archive historical value that is required. Also contemporary footage, for instance, of the Marikana incident, of recent newsmakers like Julius Malema, for instance. And all of that list was created by Mr. Nazim Hoa with the editorial staff at the TNA. And this was given out to a person called Rahul Singh. Now, Rahul Singh was an archivist who has many years of experience. He come from India. He's currently the chief archivist at the India Today Group, which is one of the largest television networks there. So he was asked to go with what are known as mini DV tapes, because and go to SABC over a period of about a month and record for about 8 hours footage that was there, and get that back to the office. Over the weekends, he would digitize it, which is basically taking it from tape and putting it on a server so that it could be used for broadcast. Now, this was a little surprising for me, because the SABC was set to launch its own television station, and we were potentially a rival for that station. For them to, at that point, take a policy decision to give a huge supply of oxygen to a potential rival through this archival footage was something that came to me as, I was very puzzled about why they would do it. Also, I was told by Nazim in discussions, so he would boast about it, that, this is a deal that he got done through his influence, that they didn't have to pay a lot of bribes. It was done over taking people out for a meal or buying them drinks, because just the name of the Guptas, that they are behind it, and the fact that the whole world knew that they had the blessings and the backing of the president would make things very easy for them. So he was very excited about the fact that he'd got such a brilliant deal. What was also making, when we had conversations in the executive committee or otherwise, was the fact that he said, they are so stupid that they've given us a deal which involves two parts. One was the actual purchase at a price, but also every time that ANN7 used that footage, there was some royalties to be paid to SABC. But they did that without having an effective system in place which could monitor how many seconds or minutes of the footage was being used. So his assertion at that time was that they're stupid because they don't have that monitoring system, and it's entirely up to us. We may have used, say, 1 hour of footage over a month, but we'll disclose that we used about a minute and pay for a minute and get away with it, or even say that we didn't use anything. There's no way that the SABC could then know what it was, how much footage was used. So over a period of time, this is how it happened, So Rahul would go with a bunch of tapes every day to the SABC office. There would be an edit system that would be given to him to copy the footage. The footage was then very neatly, since he's a professional archivist, he would meta tag the whole thing. He would categorize it under various, political, sports, historic archives and keep it there. And also what you tell me is that the footage that ANN7 had after it was acquired from SABC was much better organized and digitized, so it was much faster for us to use it in terms of breaking news or pull out the footage and put it on air than even SABC at that time, because the SABC archives were still on tape. It was not on server like what ANN7 was doing from day one. So the deal of such a nature, in my understanding, I've been a television professional now for 26 years, and I can tell you, is that if you buy footage, it's sold by the second. And archival footage is much higher in value than contemporary footage. Also contemporary footage, which has got very high news value. For instance, if it is the assassination of a head of state which has been caught on tape, is much higher value than footage of just, say, a few buildings, the parliament or others. So what surprised me in this deal was that there was a bulk rate that was given, and this rate was for archival footage, for footage that was contemporary, for footage that was buildings across the nation, which I found was very funny. In my assessment, footage of this nature, which is 100 hours, would cost in the millions of dollars, and what they got, the rate at which they got it, was something which was a throwaway price, which was something which was done as a favor. And in my understanding and my conversations with Nazim and the Gupta brothers, it was done because the officials at SABC knew that the Gupta brothers were close to President Zuma, and they didn't want to come in the way of anything, or did not want to face any consequences of showing any resistance.
Yes. So at the time when Rahul was visiting the SABC, you were already within the country, am I right?
Yes.
Yes, and you say that you had witnessed him going to the SABC for about a month.
Yes.
Would he leave your offices in the morning and come back in the afternoons every day, or how do you arrive at a month?
See, as far as I remember, it was about 6 years ago, he would go in the morning and he would be at the SABC office the whole day, and he'd come back in the evening. And over the weekends, all the footage that he'd collected, he would then digitize that, which is basically take it from tape onto the server, which could be used for broadcast. Yes. So, and at the end of the day, he would tell me how many hours had already been collected. And it is my understanding, and I've confirmed this with him as well before I came here, is that they got about 100 hours of footage from the SABC archives during his during this time.
Yes. The next witness that is going to testify is Mr. Scott, who was the sales executive within the SABC. He's going to be talking to this issue. Mm-hmm. But his testimony is that only 2,000 minutes was sold, mm-hmm. not 100 hours. What is your comment to that?
Perhaps 2,000 minutes was sold, but 100 hours was given. 100 hours was what ANN7 got. Yes. This is something that I know, which I remember absolutely. Yes. They could have sold 2,000 minutes. Maybe that's the contract that they had. I wouldn't know that. But what was received in the archives of ANN7, which was on their server, was about 100 hours. And this, I mean, if there is a forensic investigation into this, into the servers at ANN7, I'm sure, the truth
Yes.
would come out in this.
So if you're talking 100 hours, you're talking 6,000 minutes.
That's correct.
And we are certain that that's what was received by AN7.
That's correct.
Yes.
Because
And
I was getting the figures every day, and there was a tally that was done towards the end. It was approximately 100 hours. It was close to 100 hours, but definitely more than 2,000 minutes as is being suggested. It was close to 100 hours.
yes, if you say you were logging it daily, were you logging it, how were you monitoring the receipts?
No, I would
of
ask Rahul, because what Rahul did was on an Excel sheet, he would make a detail of the footage, a brief description of the footage, the number of minutes that footage was, and he would sign off on that. So there were proper records that were maintained of this on an Excel sheet, and I was shown those Excel sheets by him on his laptop at the end of the day, and that's how I knew how much was coming in. And I remember very correctly, very distinctly, that it was about 100 hours by the time he had finished with going to SABC, coming back with the footage.
Yes. Were you involved at all in the payments that were made by AN7 to SABC in relation to this deal?
I was not part of any commercial deals at all at AN7. My position was mostly editorial and, in terms of the workflow and the launch.
Yes. Were you aware of any monies that were paid towards copyright, that is the usage of the footage, by the AN7 to the SABC?
I left too early. I was told that a part of the contract was that whatever footage AN7 uses on a monthly basis, they were supposed to pay per second some royalty to SABC. But AN7 had conned SABC into giving them a contract which said that there was no, that the AN7 would self-declare how many seconds were used of SABC footage. And I can tell you for a fact that there was no way to monitor this either at AN7 or at SABC. So SABC would have had to go with the declaration that AN7 got, and from day one, I understand from my conversations with Nazim Hoa, there was an intention on the part of AN7 to give a figure that was much lower than what was being used. That, they thought, was the sweet part of the deal that we made with SABC.
Yes. Now let's just talk about the monitoring after usage. You're quite correct. The evidence of Mr. Scott is going to be that he would invite them to declare, and then they would say to him, for the month of April, we used 7 minutes, and then say 7 minutes times 2,000 Rand, which is what they were charging them for copyright. So let's just deal with the monitoring process. Is it international? Is there an international way of monitoring usage and protecting the archival content of a broadcaster?
Well, most people who are worried about their copyrights and also have commercial interests like this have their own monitoring departments. For instance, if I have done a deal with AN7, my monitoring department at SABC should actually be looking at every second of footage on a 24-hour basis and then billing them according to that, rather than waiting for the client to disclose and tell me, which could anyways be disputed. They could be under invoicing, they could be doing a whole lot of other things. The best process in this would be to have a monitoring department which monitors on a 24-hour basis, or like what YouTube does nowadays, so you can bypass human intervention altogether and have algorithms that could, which know the electronic footprint of the footage, audio, video that you have, and match it against a broadcast and give you the exact number of seconds for which this has been used. There are various ways in which the use of footage can be, or use of copyrighted footage can be monitored, which are used by broadcasters everywhere. And I think it was a very, I would think at best it would be a very innocent mistake on the part of SABC to agree to such a deal where without monitoring, you're asking the Gupta brothers to disclose on their own how much footage they used, because, that was not a commercially wise decision.
Yeah. Are you aware of something that's called the bent-in code as to how that works? And whether, when you were here in South Africa, whether any of the broadcasters that you ever dealt with used that, if there was any archival content that they wanted to sell to AN7?
The only broadcaster who I know wanted to sell archival footage to AN7 was SABC.
Yes.
And I'm not aware of this code.
Of the code, yes. So the criticism that you leveled at them is that they actually allowed the user to determine how much it should pay for. Because in essence, if the user doesn't disclose that I used 40 minutes of your footage, and I'll simply decide as a user, if I'm a devious user, that I used only 5. And as the SABC, you have absolutely no way of monitoring whether in fact they used 40 or 5.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's not the way commercial deals are done. You have to have, into the contract, you have to weave in accountability. You have to weave in a fact that there is no scope for, for want of any other word, a misunderstanding or a misreading of figures between two parties. So there had to be, in this contract, a system where there could have been an accurate, indisputable, and auditable system which could determine how much footage was used and how much money was paid, which was not done in this case. Now, this could be something that was done by somebody who was negotiating, who was not really familiar with deals like this, or it could have been done with an intent. I wouldn't know about that.
Yes, and they would have lost, if you take the 100 hours that you're talking about, that's 6,000 minutes. There's a lot of revenue that they would have lost, even if one goes according to the 2,000 rand per second sale of that footage.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. This is, what SABC did was expose themselves to fraud knowingly. So why they did it is something that I wouldn't know. I wouldn't understand.
Yes,
because it's not a commercial decision, and what Nazim Hoa called it was a sweet deal. So why would they give a sweet deal to AN7? Why I was told is because, what they said was it's because the SABC officials knew that the Guptas were close to the president, and they did not want to come in their way or ask too many questions, so they just gave a sweet deal to them.
Yes. And Mrs. Scott is going to testify that although according to the pricing guide that the SABC has, they had to sell the 2,000 minutes at 100 rand per minute, but there was a discount that was given to AN7 because, according to Mr. Scott, it was the biggest sale that they received from one client. And then the discount that was given was 30 rand, and therefore they had to pay 70 rand per minute.
Okay. See, I would, as somebody who's been in the broadcast business, would want to know, why would you want to give footage at a discount to a potential rival? If I were in his position, and I know I'm just, in hindsight, anybody can say anything, but I would have charged him more than what I charge other clients because this is a potential rival. So they've given a discount, and like I said, footage of this nature cannot be valued on a blanket basis. There is archival footage, say, of Nelson Mandela from the 70s and 80s, which is of a far higher value than of a Julius Malema, which was shot yesterday. So you cannot say that here's a blanket rate that we give you for all of that. So the valuation, if you see, was not done on any prudent basis, is my understanding of the thing. And also, if there is a rate card that they had for this footage, was this rate card made just for this deal, or is that something that existed before? Is something that would be interesting to know. But like I said, 100 hours of footage costs in the millions of dollars, and the valuation of that is something that would require chartered accountants, that would require professionals who would value, it's like you go to a shop and there is antique furniture there, and there's furniture that's made today, and there's broken furniture, and you sell all of it at the same rate. If I were to give you an analogy of a furniture shop, that's what they've done. So, as somebody who's been in this profession, I find that a little puzzling. Why would they do that? Why would they do something like that?
Yes, thank you. Maybe Mr. Scott is going to be able to explain some of those questions that you're raising. Then in paragraph 22, you deal with the visa and labor law violations. Could you just tell the chairperson, because believe that there is, maybe I'll take you to that record of to that article of Mr. Bateman, as to how did you discover that the issuing of visas to some of the employees of AN7, which were from India, was not done according to the laws of the country, or were done in a manner that was irregular? What made you to be aware of that?
Well, you know, when I arrived here, I was taken to a guest house which had a Nepali national who was working there and not getting any salary. His salary was given in cash in India, and he was working there. And when I spoke with him, he told me a lot of things which, left me thinking. For instance, he was there on a tourist visa. He was not on a work permit, but he was working there. He had to cook for dozens of people, not just the people who are staying in the guest house, but also the laborers who would come from India to construct the studio premises. Now, he told me about working conditions that they were put in, which were subhuman. The laborers would come from India on tourist visas, were staying at the studio premises while they were constructing it. There was very basic facilities for toilets and washrooms. They were, so this Nepali national would cook for them and take, and the drivers would ferry the food to those people. And also, I remember Ajay Gupta and others complaining about how those people there, a large number of them, were coming to the New Age office to use the washrooms. So on the one hand, you don't provide them enough washrooms at site, and when they come to the office, there is a total amount of disgust that he would talk about. So those, they would sleep at site, they would work at site, they would be working 24 hours. There was no labor laws that were applicable to those people. And in my view, I would be corrected by an expert if there is one. Why would, when there is abundant supply of skilled and unskilled labor for construction in South Africa, why would they get these people from there? And they were, and I was told later that Ashu Chawla, through the offices of the president, could give any number of visas to any number of people. So if it works out cheaper for them to fly people down by the plane loads from India to construct here, that's what they would do, rather than pay salaries here. Mr. Gupta also had a lot of uncharitable things to say about workers here. He said they were lazy, they would work a certain number of hours. If you asked them to work overnight, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't stay at the site and work. So just get people from India, let them stay at the site, give them very basic facilities, give them a sack of rice to cook on site, give them, supply them some meals from the guest house, and put them in I would call them subhuman conditions in which they were working. So that's when I found out that these kind of violations were taking place here. Also, towards the launch, we required a few more people, because while we were making our strategies and plans in India, we had said that we will get some skills from South Africa. For instance, the PCR staff was something that we said we will get from South Africa. And also the camera people and all of those things. But it was suddenly decided that the production control room, we could not hire anybody from South Africa, because one, the people that we were getting were very, very expensive, according to Mr. Atul Gupta and Mr. Lakshmi Goyal. It would be cheaper for us to get people from India. Also, certain critical positions, they would want the controls with them. They did not trust South African nationals or journalists to take those positions. The production control room and the video switcher being one of those issues. And the idea then was to get a whole lot of people very quickly from India before the launch, because they did not want to hire from South Africa, and I was very resistant on that. I refused to sign on any of the documents which would get a further number of people from India, because I thought that was, it was not required. We had enough number of people in South Africa who could do that job. So my decision, they overrode my decision, and Mr. Lakshmi Goyal in India appointed a lot of people, many of whom was sent here on visitor visas to work here before the launch. And that is something that I could do nothing about, because I didn't sign off on that. And most of them came here, and I was a witness to the kind of violation that was happening in this. In that case, also the same thing happened. Mr. Ashu Chawla was given a list of people who were to be brought from there. He would contact, be in touch with the president's office, who would be in touch with the Home Department, and immediately, within a day or so, the visas would be issued, and they'd be plane loads of people would come here and start working. I have complained
Yes,
about this as well.
Yes, and then, so when you realized that this was happening, am I correct that then you wrote to, after you left South Africa?
Yes.
You raised this to the Department of Home Affairs?
That's correct. So I wrote them 2 mails, a mail and a follow-up mail, but I'm, very disappointed that it's been 6 years. I have not got a single response from the Home Department seeking more details or seeking any extra information about the complaint that I gave them.
Yes.
Even, I'm digressing a little bit, even at the SABC, when my book came out and all the details were there, I was told that the SABC board had constituted a forensic investigation into the averments that I've made. But to date, it's been over a year since that committee was set up. I have never been contacted to give out any details or any of that, So that leaves me a little disappointed. It's almost like, for 6 years I've been fighting a lone battle, and I've had no support from the teams or departments that are supposed to investigate these charges. So I would want to place that on record.
Yes, maybe just to deal with the Home Affairs issue first. If you have a look at Exhibit CC1D, Mr. Chairman, which is the liver arch file submission by Mr. Apleni. Thank you. May I draw your attention to page 207? In fact, starting from 210, I beg your pardon, that's where your emails are. 210. Have you found it?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Now, that first, if you just one page back, you'll find another email at 209, and that is dated the 6th of September, 2013. But it seems to me that the one that's dated, that appears at 211, is dated the 4th of September. Am I right? Is that the 4th or 14th of September? 211.
211?
Yes.
I think in the printing there's been an error, but
Yes.
I would go with whatever's in the original. I think it should be the 4th.
It looks like the 4th to me as well. Yes. So are these the emails that you directed to the Department of Home Affairs?
Yes.
Yes. And I see that you had copied on the emails some of the recipients, Mr. Apleni, and you've got a whole list of other people.
Yes.
Where did you get these addresses?
Well, I went on the website of the Home Department, and there were a whole lot of office bearers and their email IDs that were listed. So I put a complaint to each of the office bearers and also to the head there. Now, I knew that there could be a dispute later on. So what I did was to also mark a copy of this complaint to various journalists,
Yes.
hoping that if that it would be taken by the media and there would be some pressure on the department to investigate these charges. But like I said, I'm not aware of any investigation that's happened. I was not involved in any of that.
Yes. And you, in the email that is at page 209, you make mention of certain people where you suggest that their visas were issued in a manner that was not regular.
Yes.
Yes, and could you just read into the record, maybe start off with, or maybe because it's a short email, maybe if you could just read that email.
So this is
At page 209.
209,
Yes.
and this is dated the 6th of September 2013 and 8:33 a.m. So this is addressed to all the officials at the Home Department and the journalists that I've also marked on this. Dear sir, I'm pained to note that despite my formal complaint to you a few days ago, I have not got an acknowledgement from you. I would also like to report that Infinity Media shareholder Atul Gupta and Lakshmi Goyal have started a large-scale cover-up operation to hide the tracks of the visa fraud they're perpetrating. While a bulk of the dozen of Indian laborers have quickly left South Africa, many Indian nationals who have come on business visas are also being asked to stop reporting to work after I made my complaint to you public. I fear they will be sent back to India as a means to destroy evidence. You can still probe the issue by discreetly seeking details from the editorial staff about the work done by the Indian nationals who came in on business visas. These include Sanjay Pandey, Vishnu Shankar, Anand Prakash Lal, Shameen, among others. The delay in probing the matter has already given time to Mr. Gupta and Mr. Goyal to destroy evidence and cover their tracks. I hope you will acknowledge my mail and start a probe at the earliest. Rajesh Sundaram.
Yes, thank you. As you are aware, as we conveyed this to you on Sunday, that Mr. Apleni has actually put up the document that shows that there was in fact an investigation into your complaint.
Mm-hmm.
Do you accept that?
I'm not aware of that because I was never informed of it. My
Yes.
emails went unanswered. There was no response that I got at any time.
Yes.
And,
Maybe before we go to the report, maybe just to mention that you had complained and Mr. Barry Bateman
Yes.
also took the matter up with Home
Yes,
Affairs.
yes.
And his email appears at page 208. And he's a journalist of Pretoria correspondent, Eyewitness News. And then his letter, his email of that appears, it's dated the 9th of October 2013, and he had addressed the email to Mr. Ronnie Mamwepa of the Department of Home Affairs, and he was raising the issue that you had complained about the matter and the department had not attended to it.
Yes.
Are you aware of that?
I'm seeing this letter for the first time.
The
so-
email for the first
Yes,
time?
yes.
All right, okay. So he took the matter up. And then in that email, if you read the very last sentence, the following people have been working, if you read that, he has listed some of the people that you listed in the previous email that you read. Could you just read those names out?
Which page is this?
I'm sorry, page 207 still.
Dear Ronnie, I'm just following up to confirm that you are on top of this. I have since our chat yesterday spoken to Mr. Sundaram. He has confirmed that not a single person from the department has responded to his complaint. Nearly a week after he sent it to senior officials in the department, a DG and DDG and several others. It's worth noting that Sundaram sent a follow-up letter to the above-mentioned people in which he said he had become aware of a cover-up. Despite this, the department still did not react. Sundaram has raised concerns that department officials are complicit in these visa irregularities, which could explain the department's lack of urgency. The following people have been working at ANN7 as editorial staff. However, they are alleged in the country on business visas. These visas were arranged through Sahara Computers. Please check the visas, and of course the names are Anand Prakash, Sanjay Pandey, Deepak Kaushik, Shamim Hussain, Vishnu Shankar, YP Singh, Ravi Puri, and Sunil Kumar. Please check the visas that were issued to these people to confirm whether they are business visas or work visas. My deadline for this information is midday. Regards, Barry Bateman, Pretoria correspondent, Eyewitness News, and the details.
Yes, thank you. And there's another email that you had to send after you had viewed on TV a response by the former Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Naledi Pandor.
Yes.
What happened at that time? You listened and you saw what the minister had was responding to Parliament.
Yes,
yes.
and so I did not listen to what she said, but I had read a few media reports about what was being said, and I knew that there was much more to the investigation than what was being reported. So then I had written saying that the other aspects should also be investigated about this.
Yes. If you could just turn to page 214.
Yes.
That is what Mr. Apleni has put up. In fact, maybe, Chair, if I could just take Chairperson to 201, because that
201?
201, yes, it's a submission.
Yes.
Yes, and as you can, that says feedback report on the media complaint regarding the immigration status of foreigners employed by African News Network AN7. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then they were providing the minister with a feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And on the second page, page 202,
Yes.
you will see that the list of names that came from Mr. Bateman's list in the email, and also incorporating some of the names that you had on your list.
Mm-hmm.
Those persons are listed there.
Yes.
And then there's a discussion, that they deal with the discussion in the matter. But I would like you to just look at what their findings, I would imagine, were, because in paragraph 6, what do they say there? At page 202.
On further investigation, Inspectorate discovered that 31 foreign nationals are on intra-company transfer permit. However, one of these 31 has already resigned and left the country. Our mission in New Delhi has been contacted to ensure that the permit is cancelled.
Yes. And then if you turn over the page, what do they say in paragraph 7?
The other 9 foreign employees are on visitor's visa with condition of attending business meetings. 3 of the 9 have already left the country.
Yes. And they attach those passports. And then maybe we should just read, it's not too long, because then I'll take you to the relevant pages,
Sure.
yes, to deal with them. Okay, and then paragraph 8.
The employer indicated that they intend keeping the other 6 foreign employees. As a result, the employer has approached the department and made a request for a waiver of the requirement for work permit, and should the department approve, they will make application for these employees to be issued with critical skills permits.
Yes. And then the next paragraph.
The media complaint referred to 8 foreigners, and the employer confirmed 4, namely Anand Prakash, Sanjay Pandey, Deepak Kaushik, and Vishnu Shankar. According to the employer, 3 of these 4 have already left the country, and Inspectorate has confirmed that Sanjay Pandey, Deepak Kaushik, and Vishnu Shankar left the country on the 5th and 6th of September 2013.
Yes. And then the last paragraph.
The employer mentions that the other 4, mainly Ravi Puri, Shamim Hussain, YP Singh, and Sunil Kumar, were consultants sent by SL Media and have since left the country. Inspectorate is still awaiting their full details from the mission in India in order to confirm if indeed they have left the country.
And at page 204, they have recommendations. What do they recommend to minister?
If I may add,
Yes.
so there is a bit of a factual error here, because I remember that Ravi Puri and Sunil Kumar were not employees of SL Media, but they were employees of a company called Dish TV, which is owned by the brother of Mr. Lakshmi Goyal.
Yes.
So they were not, to the best of my knowledge, I remember that they were not employees of SL Media, but they were employees of Dish TV.
Yes, thank you. And then if you turn over the page, they have recommendations there.
Recommendations. The following recommendations are made based on the discussions about that. The minister take note of the contents of this report. Foreign employees on visitors' visas be ordered to leave the country and be allowed to apply for the correct permits from country of origin.
Yes, and that was signed, there's the person's name that's put under the signature, under signature.
Kushali Empleni,
Yes, and the designation.
Director General.
Okay. And then the recommendation was approved, and the person who signed is the Minister of Home Affairs.
Yes.
Yes, who is that person?
It's Mrs. G.N.M. Pandor,
Yes.
MP.
And the date?
The date is 21/9/2013.
Yes. So would you then accept that there was an investigation that was done, immediately after these complaints, because your complaint is dated the 4th of September, the 6th September, and by the time you wrote in October, an inquiry, an investigation had been done. However informal it was, but it had been conducted.
It had been conducted, but
Yes.
I think I should have been given, a say in this. They should have asked me, because I would have given them, the few inaccuracies that have come in here. Also, these are the names that I remembered of the editorial staff. There were a whole lot of other laborers who had come in there, the construction workers, the skilled, unskilled people. That's not been part of this investigation, which is something that I had mentioned in my complaint as well. So what they've done here is that they've selectively used certain elements. I was not part of this, I was never contacted for my views on this, on my complaint. But a whole lot of the others who had come.
Did they ever acknowledge receipt of your complaint?
No.
Did they ever write to you
Never.
or communicate with you in any way?
It's been about 6 years now. I have not received any acknowledgement or anything from them.
And it's only when you were preparing for giving your evidence here that you got to know that something
Yes.
was done, even though it didn't cover everybody that you had complained about, and
Yes.
it doesn't appear to have been adequate.
Yes, Chairman.
And I referred you yesterday to page 213, if you recall, where your name appears as item number 31.
Yes.
Recall that?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like you to go to page 214.
Yes.
As you can see, there's names there that are highlighted in red, and there seems to be a page missing, but it doesn't, because it's a continuation from 31, I beg your pardon. So if you look at, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 names that are highlighted in red. Could you just read those names and read what the nature of their visas, and also read what the comment is right at the end? That is the last column, the fourth column, the fifth column.
So item number 33 is Lal Anand Prakash. There's his passport number which is given. Visitor's visa issued on 14/8/2013 with a condition for business meetings valid for 30 days, expired. He was a studio director. He was not there for meetings. He was actually a studio director doing work in the PCR, switching videos.
And had they contacted you before conducting this investigation, you would have given him
Absolutely.
that
I would have done
information?
that.
Yes, thank you. And then the next name?
36, Pandey Sanjay, his passport number is given, and visitor's visa issued on 12/8/2013 with a condition for business meetings valid for 90 days. And it's valid and left the country, but he was not there for business meetings. He was actually the one who coordinated the whole production for the launch, and he was also taking care of the overall PCR operations while the launch happened.
Yes.
So he was actually working at the Midrand office.
And then the number 38?
Kaushik Deepak, visitor visa issued on 14/8/2013 with a condition for business meetings valid for 30 days, expired, left the country. He was also working during the launch.
Are you able to tell whether they left before you left the country or after you left?
They left after I left the country.
After you left, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
And then the last one?
Vishnu Shankar, or Shankar Vishnu, they've got his passport, visitor permit issued on 12/8/2013 with the condition for business meetings valid for 60 days. 60 days, yes.
Yes.
Valid, left the country. He was part of the output desk there. He was clearing scripts, he was making rundowns, and he was doing editorial work in violation of the visa that he was issued.
Yes. So as far as you are concerned, even the information that is here is unreliable?
I would say that, because we had a newsroom full of journalists who knew what these people were doing.
Yes.
If they had gone, not to me, but any of the people working at that time at ANN7, they would have known that these people were working there. They were not there for meetings, they were not there for any other purpose, not as tourists, but they were actually actively working in the newsroom.
Yes.
In violation. And I would want to state here as well that I did not sign off on these appointments. I did not sign off on any of these people coming and working in South Africa.
Yes.
This was put before me, and I had categorically said I would not do it.
Yes, thank you. And then lastly, if I may just take you to page 365. Or maybe this is a parliamentary just for authentication purposes. If I may just take the chairperson to page 359.
Uh, 369?
359, 359, sure. 359, yes. It's just towards the end of the bundle. Are you there, Mr. Ram? Found it? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. That document has logo Home Affairs Department, and it's written submission, and then subject, what's the subject there?
Parliamentary question number 2490, National Assembly written reply, Mr. GPD McIntosh, COPE.
Yes. And what is the purpose of that?
To provide Minister with a draft response attached as Annexure 1 to Parliamentary Question 2490, NA within brackets, for consideration and approval.
And if you go to page, oh, and then it's the page that's got signatures, if you go to page 361, there's a recommendation there.
Yes.
And what is the recommendation?
It is recommended that Minister approve the draft response prepared by the department in respect of Parliamentary Question 2490,
Yes. And it's signed by the Director General.
Director General, on the 3rd of October 2013.
And it appears to have been approved by the Minister on which date?
Yes, on the 6th of October 2013.
Yes. And then there's a routes list. I'm sure it started with the chief directors, chief admin clerks. But at page 363, then we get to see what the actual question 2490 that was posed by Mr. McIntosh, what the question was. Okay, could you just read that into record, please?
Which page is this?
Page 363.
Uh, 2490.
2490, yes.
Yeah, whether her department will take any steps with regard to allegations, details furnished that some staff members from India were employed illegally and without work permits by Africa News Network 7. If not, what is the department's position with regard to A, this matter, and B, other whistleblowers who bring similar occurrences to the attention of a department? If so, what are the relevant details?
Yes, thank you. And then if you turn over the page, at page 364, that question, as you can see, there's a stamp that appears to be from Parliament.
Yes.
Do you see that?
Yes.
At the bottom of that page, dated 17 September. No, I think this is where the copy that was received by the Commission, I beg your pardon, received by the Commission from Parliament.
Okay.
And it's marked 2980. But I would like you to go to page 366, because that is where a reply is given by the department to the question. Yes. Mr. Chairperson, we can confirm that this appears to be incomplete, but it is indeed complete. We had received it from Parliament. Yes, thank you. And the reply, what is the reply to the question that we've already read at page 366?
Yes, the Department of Home Affairs acted immediately on the allegations that Africa News Network 7 had employed foreign nationals without proper work permits. It was alleged in the complaint received by the department that 8 foreign nationals were employed by ANN7 without proper work permits. A parliamentary investigation
Yes.
A preliminary investigation conducted by the department confirmed that 8 foreigners were in possession of visitors permit and in the country legally. The condition of their permits allowed them to attend business meetings. The department also discovered that 4 of the 8 foreigners had already left the country, and the remaining 4 were found to be conducting training for employees, but they were not on the payroll of ANN7. Despite the fact that ANN7 did not consider them to be employees since they were not remunerated for such an activity, the department found that the 4 persons who violated the condition of their permits and were therefore ordered to leave the country. The department has confirmed that they all have left the country. The department understands that whistleblowers raise concerns so that those concerns can be addressed. Any person who would like to raise concerns about similar occurrences is encouraged to call the department hotline on 0800 601190, and they can do so anonymously and are also not expected to prove the allegations.
Yes, thank you. The chairperson asked you whether you were ever contacted by the department after you had filed your complaints. Maybe it would be proper for me to refer the chairperson to a submission that Mr. Apleni has put up and his explanation about your correspondence. If I may just refer the chairperson to pages 1. It's a letter, it's a submission, but framed in the form of a letter addressed to the chairperson, to the secretary of the commission. Page 1 of that. Just have to write at the beginning.
Page 1?
Yes, are you on page 1?
Yes.
As you can see, it's addressed to Mr. Pedler, who is the acting secretary of the commission. In paragraph 4 of that, could you just read briefly what he says there?
I wish to state upfront that I do not know, have never met, received any correspondence, or ever spoken to any Gupta family member or associates.
And then in paragraph 8, he deals with the correspondence that we've dealt with your emails, those dated the 4th and the 6th of September. What does he say about him not receiving those emails?
You want me to read that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. In this case, according to the information provided to me by the department, in particular from the DG's office, the emails dated the 4th and 6th September 2013 were never received. Based on this response, I have requested a confirmation from the department's information technology section, which indicates that they have reviewed my email account and could not find the mentioned emails. In this case, I wish to refer the attention of the Commission to Annexure 4, attached herein for ease of reference. Therefore, the only email which my then office received was that of the 9th of October 2018, and the views of the office the view of the office was that the matter was already closed, since the report by Inspectorate was already concluded. In this regard, I wish to state that the said email of the 9th of October 2018 was never brought to my personal attention.
Yes, thank you. Then, in summary of your evidence about these employees who had these visas, which you believe were obtained in a manner, in fact, confirmed some who have left the country, do you know of any of these employees who are still within the country?
No, not aware.
Yes, thank you.
You got a chance to read Mr. Apleni's documentation in regard to what the Department of Home Affairs did, is that right?
I have not read the whole thing,
Yes.
but I have gone through the summary
Yes.
and the relevant portions
Yes.
that are there.
Well, did you come across anything that suggests that the investigation that the Department of Home Affairs did entailed doing something against or about those other than the employees from India, who may have facilitated the breaking of the law in regard to their employment? Did you come across anything that suggested that the department had done something about this, had reported it to the relevant authorities or Department of Labor or the police or the National Prosecuting Authority? Did you come across anything like that?
Although in my reading, I've seen that they've talked about the employees, but what action they've taken against the employer for violating the visa norms is something that I do not know. They do accept that there were people working on on visit visas and business visas here, but that clearly is a violation of the law. But I would also like to say that, as a whistleblower in this matter, the fact that I was never contacted to get information, because I had all the information about these people. ANN7 would say that they were here for training or for business meetings, but the fact that they were not, I was not consulted, and I'm also surprised that you had a newsroom full of people who were working with them. None of those employees at ANN7 were also contacted during this investigation. So I find that a little puzzling.
Yes, there are no statements from those employees,
Yes.
whether they just attended meetings or they actually worked or anything like that.
Or also the people who worked in the newsroom. For instance, Vishnu
Yes.
Shankar was there clearing scripts. So you
Yes.
can ask any of the journalists who were working at that time whether he was working or he was there to attend meetings. There'll be multiple people in the newsroom there who say that he was making rundowns, he was working in a shift there. If he came in the morning shift, he would come in a morning shift or evening shift. He was working there as in the newsroom. And there are dozens of witnesses to that, none of whom I think were contacted as per my reading of this. It was an investigation that was conducted. Tenets of natural justice were not followed, because if I'm the complainant and I'm a whistleblower, I should have been contacted to give more details. I was always willing to do that. And it was me who went out of the way to write mails while I was also doing other work in India to persuade them to do this investigation. And when I come here to South Africa now, it's the first time I know that there's been an investigation and these are the details.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's just something that we didn't deal with yesterday that relates to how ANN7 was allocated the slot by multi-choice.
Yes.
Could you just briefly just tell the chairperson as to how that happened?
Well, they were very adamant about a particular number. Now, I have written that number in the book, and I have
Yes.
to refer to that.
Maybe if I could just refer the witness, Mr. Chairman, to page 66 of your book.
66.
Yes, thank you.
I'll just quickly refer.
Yes.
Yeah, the slot that they wanted was 404, because that was a prime slot that was between two existing news stations. And the Gupta brothers feared that DSTV was somehow inimical to them, and they would give them a slot which was not with the news channels, but somewhere else where it would be difficult for people to find it, and that could affect their ratings. So, I found DSTV to be extremely professional in their conduct. They would want technical details. They would want to know, whether ANN7 has actually started a 24-hour dry run, which was never the case before the station actually launched. ANN7 went 24/7 on broadcast the day it was launched. Before that, they would do a few hours and then wind it up, because none of the equipment or all of the equipment that was required for a 24-hour operation had not come in. Like I said before, even the studio robotic cameras came in the last minute and were being installed on the day of the launch. So there was a whole lot of lying which we were required to do when we went to the DSTV meetings, So especially Mr. YP Singh, who was the technical, he was looking at the technical installation and the integration at that time. He would be asked to go to those meetings, and with a straight face, he'd have to tell them lies about how we were at a very advanced stage and that we were already doing 24-hour news bulletins and all of that. Also, I was told on multiple occasions that they would use the president's office to pressure DSTV to give them the slot that they wanted, which is 404. This is something that I was told repeatedly, and we had multiple meetings with DSTV at their office, and at every time the level of progress or the installation of technology, the information that we were giving them was all wrong, and we were many days, many weeks behind schedule.
Yes, thank you. Then if you may then go back to your statement. You have dealt with Home Affairs.
Yes.
And at paragraph 27, you deal with certain payments that were made. Could you just tell the chairperson what is it that you want to convey in paragraphs 27 and 28, please? At page 4 of your statement.
Did you say paragraph 27 and 28
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
of his statement?
Of his, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, page 4. Have you found it?
27?
Yes. Yes. What are you saying in those paragraphs?
You know that many of the expenses were paid in cash in Indian rupees in India. For instance, the person who designed and fabricated the set was paid in Indian rupees by Mr. Lakshmi Goyal. I was a witness to that. Also, wads of 1,000 rupee notes were handed out to the person who did the look and feel of the station, which is basically the graphics and the graphic templates for the on-screen graphics that were there. He was paid in cash in front of me in Delhi. And also, going back to the previous point where he said that there were a lot of employees who were who were not paid, that they were working gratis on business visas. That is not true, because most of those people, before they came here, were paid in cash by Mr. Lakshmi Goyal in India, their first month's salary, and that's why they came here. So there would be no records of them having any banking transactions between AN7 and them here, because they were being paid cash in India. Also, there were many other employees, like for instance, the laborers who came here to construct the studio. Also, the housekeeping Nepali national who was working there. They were all paid in cash in India. So this is something that I know is a clear violation of the tax laws in India. My understanding of the tax laws in India is that if you're paying anything above 5,000 rupees, should be done either through an electronic transfer or through a check. You cannot have cash payments. And this is something that was happening there with the sanction of the directors. Mr. Lakshmi Goyal was giving these cash at his office, and this was something that the Gupta brothers here knew, which Nazim Hua knew, and they were okay with, because these employees were coming from India, and on records here it would be like no banking transactions between AN7 and them, but they were actually being paid in India for the work that they were doing here.
Yes.
So this again is something that I did not approve of at that point.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes the evidence on the statements of the witness. If I may just, at this point, address the chairperson on the affidavit of Mr. Williams, which he submitted yesterday, which is the exhibit which I placed before the chairperson this morning.
Maybe before you do that,
Yes.
Well, Mr. Sundaram, you may or may not have covered this, but I just want to check that you have covered it. In paragraph 23 of your statement, page 3 thereof, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what appears to be sub-paragraphs up to 7. In paragraph 5, no, in paragraph 4, you say, Atul Gupta also told me that a large number of these employees would be brought in on tourist visas and made to work for a few months. If they are not found suitable, they could be dismissed and sent back. Work permits would be issued later to those who proved their worth. Paragraph 5, you say, when I questioned Atul Gupta about the legality of making people work on tourist visas, he said, and then you quote, I have the government in my pocket. You don't worry about what is legal and what is illegal, close quotes. Did Mr. Atul Gupta say that?
Yes, he did.
And you are sure about that?
Absolutely, I am, yes.
Yes. And then in your book, at page 46, you talk about you write about discussions relating to the waterproof landing incident. And you say, and I'll read quite a bit, Atul spent a lot of time justifying the waterproof landing incident, which happened just days before our arrival at this first meeting. And then you quote, and I think you are suggesting that this is what Mr. Atul Gupta said. Our family is close to President Zuma. We have never hidden it. We are a powerful family, and I'm sure all the hype around this landing will also pass with time. We land at Air Force stations in India all the time. So what is wrong with landing our guests at an Air Force base here with all due clearances? We are being targeted. And then the last paragraph of that page, you quote him as having said, President Zuma knows our family well, and we have deep bonds with his family. We have enough influence in the government to clear our name. And it is not just President Zuma. We have close links with all senior ANC leaders. We are Banayas. We are Indian Jews. We do not keep all our eggs in one basket. Whoever becomes president of South Africa in the years to come, I can assure you, he will be our friend, close quotes. Did Mr. Atul Gupta say what you say he said in this page?
Yes, he said these things multiple times, because immediately after we had arrived here, that was around the time when the Waterkloof incident had happened. And some of the people who had come from India were a little worried whether they took a wrong decision. And this was, in some senses, although not directly said by him, but in some terms to reassure the people who came from India that, look, you don't need to worry. It will seem like, when you're reading the media that we are in a lot of trouble, but we are not. We've got, great friendship with the president. We have, and he'd say multiple times that we've got the government in our pocket. That's something that he'd keep repeating. Like if I ask him about the visa violation, say, oh, we've got the government in our pockets. You don't worry about what's legal and what's not legal. So this is something that he'd keep repeating post the Waterkloof incident, especially if he found somebody a little worried about, all the media, the negative media that the Guptas were getting in,
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, it has been brought to my attention that it's 11:15. Yes, thank you.
Yes, maybe let's just finish one or two others that I want to check with Mr. Sundaram.
Okay.
I think you did cover this yesterday in regard to suggestions of presenters. You say at page 108 of your book, Nazim and Atul also had a list of presenters sent by President Zuma. This included former government spokesperson Jimmy Mani. Is that true?
That is true, yes. I want to add that, this was something that was recommended by President Zuma in one of the meetings.
Yes.
When they were asked about presenters, I very distinctly remember President Zuma telling Nazim that,
Yes.
he thinks Jimmy Mani would be a good presenter and that he
Yes.
should be considered.
Okay, we'll take the tea adjournment and just have a look at one or two things that I just want to check whether you confirm them.
Yes, thank you.
We'll take the tea adjournment now and resume at 25 to 12.
Thank you.
I just want to draw to check something. Mr. Sundaram. I'm sorry. At page 82 of your book, you you say the following somewhere in the middle of the page, like Lakshmi, I hope I pronounced the name correctly.
Yes.
Okay. I think that is Mr. Atul Gupta, because in the previous sentence you talk about him.
Yes, Chairman.
You say, like Lakshmi, he blamed the media for playing up the incident. He claimed his family had the required permission to land the jet, and in the same breath, he mentioned the proximity his family enjoyed with President Zuma and his family. And then you quote, and you attribute this to Mr. Atul Gupta, and I guess I will see in your supplementary affidavit which codes you regard as proper codes, or where you meant to just make the point and did not mean to say that is what the person said word for word.
Yes.
You say, and you quote and you say, Atul Gupta said, President Zuma is on our side. He knows our family, and we helped him when he was down and out. He will help us through this as well. You know, top ministers of the Zuma cabinet attended the wedding. This is a direct endorsement for us. The personnel against whom action has been taken will be reinstated very soon. We are an influential family here, and no one can point fingers at us. Close quote, Atul boasted. I didn't read this to you before, did I?
No.
I didn't read this.
No, you did not.
Oh,
Mr.
okay. Now, did Mr. Atul Gupta say this to you?
Yes, he did.
You have no doubt about it.
No, he
Yes.
said this, absolutely.
You've got it in quotes. Could it be that it's not word for word, but he made these points, or is it what he said word for word?
This is not word to word, but this is
Yes.
something that he's told me many times
Yes.
over the interactions over the months that I was working there.
Yes. Well, you see, there are two parts in this passage that attract my attention. The one is that, according to you, Mr. Atul Gupta said that President Zuma is on our side, he knows our family, and we helped him when he was down and out. He will help us through this as well. What attracts me to that is that earlier this year, one of the witnesses of giving evidence before me, Mr. Fikile Mbalula, he is a member, I believe, of the National Executive Committee of the ruling party, the ANC, and at different times has been minister and deputy minister in President Zuma's government. He is He has been appointed as minister recently as well. When he gave evidence before me, one of the things he said was that in a certain NEC meeting of the ANC, the question of the proximity of President Zuma to the Gupta family was raised, and there was concern that that friendship or alleged friendship between them was damaging the image of the ruling party and the image of the government. And Mr. Mbalula said Mr. Zuma's response, either on that occasion or on other occasions, and maybe it's not but Mr. Mbalula, maybe it's another witness, I'm not sure now, or maybe it was Mr. Ramatloti, I can't remember. But one of the witnesses said, who attended, who was an NEC member, said Mr. Zuma, when asked why he was not terminating his friendship with the Gupta family, he said that that family had helped his children when nobody else could help them, I think in terms of employment. So I just find it interesting that you say that Mr. Atul Gupta said President Zuma is on our side, he knows our family, and we helped him when he was down and out. He will help us through this as well. So that's one of the things that attracted me. The second one is that you say, Mr. Atul Gupta said, the personnel against whom action has been taken will be reinstated very soon. Now, you must just tell me what personnel was he talking about there? I think this was in the context of the waterkloof landing, if I understand what you say in the book.
Yes.
What was Mr. Atul Gupta talking about when he said the personnel against whom action has been taken will be reinstated very soon? We are an influential family here, and no one can point fingers at us.
Well, this was around the time when the waterkloof incident was being investigated, and there were a few officials who had been, there was some action that was taken against them, and they were, if I remember correctly, were either dismissed or suspended from service. So, so this was a time when a lot of the people who had come from India were getting a little anxious about the waterkloof and if, the kind of impact it would have on the family. So he would boast and tell us on multiple occasions that whoever, of course, in the short term, they'll have to show that there's some action that was taken, that some heads have rolled. But he said, those don't worry about them, they will be all reinstated. That, he will use whatever influence is there, that anybody who helped him will not face any consequences of their action, and that they would be reinstated at a better position at a future date. Now, I wouldn't know whether that happened, but that's something that he would talk about, that he would ensure that anybody who faced action because they helped the Gupta family during the waterkloof incident will not, they may be facing consequences in the short term, but in the long term, they'd be happy they did it because they would be rewarded for it with much higher positions, and the family would help them use their influence to get them out of whatever punitive actions been taken against them.
So this was in 2014. You were in South Africa in 2014.
No, 2013.
2013.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Ms. Newman,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
those investigating the issue of the waterkloof landing
Yes, Mr.
need to check. I seem to remember that in the media there were suggestions that somebody or certain people who were said to have been blamed for or the waterkloof landing were promoted or were given certain positions that didn't seem to be in line with disapproving
The action.
their alleged role.
Yes.
So it will be important for the commission investigators to have a look and see also whether whether there were any promotions or reinstatements such as I talked about
Yes.
here, which Mr. Sundaram is talking about, and when they happened.
Yes.
For example, we know which months he was in South Africa when, if his evidence is true that Mr. Guptas said this, we need to check whether, in fact,
It
something along those lines seems to have happened.
Yes. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. We've noted.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the one thing I forgot to do was to ask that the book be given an exhibit number.
Oh, yes.
Might I ask that it be marked exhibit CC1F?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Maybe
We'll
should
mark
get
it for the chairperson.
we should get maybe a clean copy.
A
first.
clean copy. I do
a
have.
clean, and you will mark it
I will mark it
exhibit.
exhibit CC1F.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, that's
Thank you,
fine.
Mr. Chairman. Thank
Yeah,
you very much.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the one aspect that I would like the chairperson to deal with, the affidavit of Mr. Williams, at various paragraphs, he makes mention like paragraph 11 of CC1E.
Mr. Williams.
Yes, CC1E.
Yeah.
Yes, at paragraph 11, if I may just direct the chairperson to those paragraphs. Paragraph 11, paragraph 18 and 19, but if you start with paragraph 11, this is what he says at page 7, paginated page 7.
Who is he? This was handed up
This was handed up.
today,
This
so I
is
don't know anything about it.
This is Mr. Mohsin Williams. He is one of the implicated persons.
He's one of the implicated
Yes,
persons.
he did not respond during the time allowed. He
Yeah.
simply, this we received yesterday
Yes.
when the commission had started leading the evidence.
And what is it?
It is an affidavit. There is no notice of motion.
Yeah.
He makes it clear in the affidavit, Mr. Chairman, that he does not wish to cross-examine Mr. Sundaram. He also makes it very clear in paragraphs 18 and 19 that he does not wish to come and testify before the commission. The legal team has taken a view, depending on what the chairperson's direction is going to be, that in the light of the fact that he doesn't wish to come, he doesn't wish to cross-examine Mr. Sundaram, then Mr. Sundaram must be afforded an opportunity to respond to his affidavit in writing, should the chairperson direct so. Or the other alternative, of course, would be that these matters that he disputes in Mr. Sundaram's evidence, that Mr. Sundaram be given an opportunity to deal with those now and in evidence. But we are all subject to the direction by the chairperson, because there is no, we don't know what, he simply says, I'm placing this before the commission, but he denies most of the evidence of Mr. Sundaram. But he does, of course, admit one meeting where the president was present at the president's residential home, official residence, and that is the meeting of the 22nd of June 2013. And he says it might very well be that it is that meeting, but what he disputes is whether at that meeting matters that related to editorial policy and everything else were discussed. So,
Yeah, well, if she doesn't want to subject herself to giving evidence, if that is what she says,
yes. If I may read it, paragraph
Yeah.
11, Mr. Chairman.
paragraph 11.
Yes, page 7. I have, in the circumstances, anxiously considered my position in relation to the notice. I will not make application to cross-examine the witness, but nevertheless wish to submit this affidavit and request the commission, its legal team, and the investigators to consider what I set out herein. And then in paragraph 18 and 19, I submit that the evidence of Mr. Sundaram is not true, and this evidence ought to be properly tested with the view of determining the credibility and veracity of the allegations he makes. It is doubtful that cross-examination of the witness will be allowed in the circumstances, and I will therefore not apply to cross-examine the witness. In paragraph 19, I accordingly do not wish to assert my right to cross-examine and do not apply to cross-examine Mr. Sundaram. I have confidence in the evidence leaders in that they will present all relevant evidence to the Commissioner and that such evidence will be presented to the Commission fairly and objectively. And lastly, paragraph 20, Mr. Chairman, for the reasons set out here in under, I also do not intend to give evidence before the Commission for the following reasons. 1, I have not done anything improper and have not committed any crimes. 2, I have most certainly not committed the offenses of corruption and fraud or participated in such offenses in any way whatsoever. And 3, I am not in possession of any evidence which may assist this Commission to make any conclusive findings insofar as the Commission's terms of reference are concerned.
Well, have you had a chance to reflect on the usefulness of this affidavit?
It is useful in the sense that, 1, he has made mention of certain areas which he believes that we could investigate. First of all, he denies that the security at the President's official residence is as lax as Mr. Sundaram had testified. And he points that security records would show that he is in fact correct in that regard. And secondly, he says, he refers to a certain agency that says, that where he says that that agency could assist the Commission in getting more information. Then to that extent, it would assist then the investigators to follow up on those leads. It is for that reason that we believe that it will also be prudent for Mr. Sundaram to actually sit down and deal with this affidavit in writing and maybe file a supplementary affidavit dealing with all the matters that he alleges in this affidavit. Yes.
But that would have to happen at some stage because Mr. Sundaram is leaving today, or?
That is correct. He's leaving today.
Yes.
That is correct.
But
we will monitor that, Chairperson.
Sorry?
We could monitor the submission of the affidavit. Mr. Sundaram could attend to it speedily, and then we'll make sure that it gets submitted.
But did you say there are certain aspects that you would prefer to give him a chance to deal with?
That's correct, yes.
Okay,
yes.
Let's deal with those that you can deal with.
Yes.
And then the affidavit can be made available to Mr. Sundaram and he can respond to it. But whatever it is that he can deal with now, let him deal with it. Yeah. What he can't deal with because he needs more time, then will have to be dealt with at a later stage. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sundaram, may I just take you to paragraph, just see, 20, sorry. At paragraph 8, if you go to paragraph 8 of Mr. Williams, that is exhibit CC1E. Do you have it?
Yes.
Thank you. In paragraph 8, oh, sorry, this is work of the Commission. It deals with him complaining about the notice. But I'd like to direct you to paragraph 30. I beg your pardon. In paragraph 30, this is what Mr. Williams says. I held this position, which is the position of the editorial director in independent newspaper, which he deals with in paragraph 29. I held this position until September 2012, when I took up the position as the editor of the New Age newspaper. In June 2017, I reached retirement age and I retired at the age of 65 from my position as the editor of the New Age newspaper. I had, in the interim, also served as the editor-in-chief of the television news channel AN7. Do you know the period when Mr. Williams was the editor of AN7?
No, I don't. It's after I had left from here.
Yes, and here he does not give us the dates as to when he took up that position. Is that correct? In this paragraph?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. And then if you go to page 37, he says, I consider the allegations against me in an extremely serious light, especially that these allegations may tarnish or blemish my reputation, a reputation of professional and personal integrity I have taken a lifetime to build up and which I cherish. It may now be destroyed as a consequence of allegations made by an individual who has an axe to grind. What do you say to that?
Well, I've gone through the affidavit, and I think it's a bunch of half-truths and absolute lies. And I would say that I stand by my affidavits and the supplementary affidavit and everything I've said in those things. The meetings that he's disputing can very well be verified by the investigators in terms of the records that have been maintained at President Zuma's residence. I've given dates, exact dates of those meetings, and also, the meetings that happened in July and August, there are tentative dates. It's a Sunday in July. So records there, the CCTV footage, there's a whole lot of ways in which these meetings can be verified. I stand by the position that I've taken. All the facts that I've given in my affidavit, I absolutely stand by them.
Yes, thank you. And then at paragraph 39, he says, based on what I have read, it appears to be clear that Mr. Sundaram has not been very successful in obtaining employment after his brief tenure with AN7, that he is reliant upon the sales of his book, and that he may well be motivated by an immense dislike for the Gupta family, and in particular Mr. Atul Gupta. Can we pause there and ask you, after you left AN7, did you manage to get any employment in India? And when last, if you did, when did that happen, and how long did it last?
Well, ever since I went back from here, I have launched 2 television stations in Chennai, News 7 Tamil and Kaveri News. And I have not been out of employment. I chose to not work while I was writing the book for a few months, and I resigned from Kaveri News, which is the second station I set up just last year in August. That was because I had to prepare for my transplant. I have been asked by my doctors to stay away from full-time work for 6 months post the transplant, and I have had no dearth of work after I quit there. I have also had the position of a consultant for the Rajasthan Patrika group, and I've worked straight through. And the days or months that I've not worked is because of medical reasons, or the time immediately after I came back when I was writing the book. So this, like other elements in this affidavit, is an absolute lie.
Yes. And then just recently, maybe about a month ago, did you do any work? Were you working last month?
Yes, I was approached by the Bennett and Coleman company, which owns the Times of India group, to be a senior journalist to be on the panel for the election coverage. So they have a channel called Mirror Now, and I was on the panel for the election coverage right from a few weeks before the elections till the end of elections. I'm still one of the panelists for Mirror Now right now, and I'm also an editorial consultant with a newspaper based in Washington, D.C. called India America Today. So, I mean, that's a position that I have is on a consultative basis. So, so what Mr. Mohsin Williams is saying is something which has no factual basis, and is an absolute lie, like most of the other things in his affidavit.
Yes, thank you. And then he continues, all of this against the background of a disastrous launch of the television station, a launch he was primarily responsible for. Apart from having spent only 3 months in the country, having not been very successful as the editor of AN7, having a tumultuous relationship with his employers, and having left the Republic under a cloud, Mr. Sundaram appears to justify his lack of success at AN7 with reference to allegations which are simply not true in a book he wishes to sell and to protect a professional reputation. 2 questions arising from that. Did you leave the Republic under a cloud? And if so, what was that? Are you aware of that cloud? I don't know.
Absolutely not. I have explained in my book that the disastrous launch, or a train wreck as I call it,
Yes.
was because of the micromanagement by Atul Gupta, the tearing hurry in which they did not allow the professionals to take a decision. The technicians were under tremendous pressure, and nobody would, at the end of the day, because of the sheer fear that they had of Atul Gupta's rage, would tell him that what he was doing was wrong and that we were heading towards a disaster. Even those who told him that were seen with suspicion. And the reason why the launch at AN7 was a disaster was because of Mr. Atul Gupta, and the fact that he would go into a fit of rage if anybody went against what he was saying. He ignored professional advice. And for us, towards the end, it was clear that we were almost on a suicide mission. We were going into this. We knew that it was sure failure at the end of it. But as professionals, we knew that we had to go into it. We couldn't abandon it, and we went straight head on. And like I said yesterday, the reason why we came out of this without in the form that we did was because of the hard work that the South African technicians and journalists put in this place. It could have been much worse had that not been the situation. They were the glue that made sure that, within a matter of weeks, we were in a position where we could launch. Of course, it was not to the professional standards that I've launched other channels, but I would say here categorically that that was because I was not allowed to work. I was working with my hands tied behind my back and constantly micromanaged by the Gupta brothers, especially Mr. Atul Gupta.
Yes, and he says when he deals with the meetings at the official residence of the former president, paragraph 42, he says, I do not consider the affidavits deposed by Mr. Sundaram to directly implicate me in any acts of corruption or fraud. I understand the allegations to simply mean that I, in the company of others, attended 3 meetings at the official residence of the former president, Mr. Jacob Zuma, in Pretoria, and that I, furthermore, was present at a visit to the studios of AN7 by Mr. Zuma on 19 August 2013. And then he describes how he met the president for the first time, but this is what I would like you to comment on. He says, in paragraph 46, during my tenure as editor of a New Age newspaper, I also met Mr. Zuma on 2 further occasions when I accompanied members of my staff and or reporters of AN7 for on-the-record interviews with the former president and for several off-the-record briefings subsequently. I interpose to invite attention to the fact that members of the media regularly meet with senior politicians and do so for a variety of reasons. Quite frequently, politicians would engage members of the media in relation to matters concerning their political parties and in an endeavor of attempting to persuade members of the media to be sympathetic to their party or their particular cause, or even sway members of the media in favor of their political views. Is this what he says? Is it a common occurrence, as he puts it?
I think what he's talking about is a diversionary tactic. I'm talking apples, he's talking oranges. For an editor or a journalist to go meet politicians and presidents, that's nothing out of the ordinary. But these meetings, why I would say is different, is because he's not only the editor of the New Age, he's a director in the company that is owned, which he's not disclosed in this. He also has not disclosed that the president's son is a shareholder in the company that he's talking about, and he's denying engaging in commercial discussions with the presidents. And I can understand why he's doing that, because then he would be implicating himself. I think the facts are in my book here about the number of meetings that he attended and the number of meetings that he did not. I've clearly said that he was part of the first meeting. There was one meeting in which he was visiting Cape Town and he couldn't come, and also details of the 4th meeting are also given. So most of the facts that he's relying on are also dubious in this case. And to answer your question, I would say an editor meeting a politician or the president is not out of the ordinary. What is out of the ordinary is the fact that as a director of the company, you're going with the owners of your newspaper for business dealings. That, I think, it brings a direct conflict of interest. It's not definitely not pertaining to the highest standards of journalistic ethics that I know of.
Yes, and in paragraphs 50, 51, 52, and 54, there he deals with the fact that it is, what you say that there were matters of editorial policy that were discussed with the president. That is not correct. But I'm just summarizing it instead of just reading everything into the record. He says that is not what happened. They were going there as any other media would go and get the ear of the president, as he suggests in the previous paragraph that I read to you. What do you say to that?
I would say that he's lying in his affidavit, that I stand by what I've said. What was discussed was matters of editorial policy, about the design of the studios, about commercials in terms of the expense heads and things like that. I stand by whatever I've said in my affidavit, and I contradict what he's saying in his.
Yes. Maybe just to confirm what I had already conveyed to the chairperson without reading from the paragraph 66, where he says that although I do not recall the specific date on which I attended the meeting, it may very well be the 22nd of June 2013, the date referred to by Mr. Sundaram. It is no small significance that he is unable to recollect the date in July or August when the 2nd and 3rd meetings are alleged to have taken place. as I am confident the records at the security checkpoints within this official estate of government residence will not support the presence of any of the individuals claims to have been at the residence of the President during July and August 2013. Regardless of the dates, though, I am confident that the delegation only visited the President's residence on one occasion.
Well, I would want to put this to him, I mean, the fact that he doesn't want to cross-examine me, or the fact that he does not want to subject himself to cross-examination speaks volumes. What I would say is that what I've said is factually correct. We were waved in to the President's residence. There are records of the Gupta fleet cars in which we went, and a record of that was sent through Aslam to Mr. Ashu Chawla, and there would be records of that there. I'm sure there are CCTV cameras at the porch where you could see where the entries took place. While the specific dates I've not put in here because I would not know for sure, but I know that it is a Sunday in July 2013, and I would say that if the investigators were to go and look at the CCTV footage, to look at the records of the security in terms of the cars that entered there, they would know that what I'm saying is the truth. As far as August is concerned, a similar thing I would request the investigators to go through, and I would challenge Mr. Muxim Williams, if there is, that what he's saying is an absolute lie. And if I have to stay an extra day, I'd do that. If he wants to cross-examine me, I'm willing to face him. And I'm sure when the investigators get their evidence, they would know that what I'm saying is the absolute truth about these meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are the matters that I wish to raise with Mr. Sundaram. Thank you.
With regard to the keeping of records at the President's official residence, you did testify that you noticed that it appeared when you went to the President's official residence that security was quite lax, and you said you didn't know whether that's how it normally was, or whether it was simply because you were part of this was a delegation from the Gupta family. Do you have any recollection whether anybody was recording that the delegation, that people were coming in and out, leaving out any security cameras?
I know for a fact that before we went for these meetings, the vehicle numbers, and these vehicles were from the Gupta fleet of cars, and I'm sure there are records of that. We only went in the SUVs from the Gupta fleet, and they were, the numbers, the registration numbers of these vehicles were given in advance to Mr. Ashu Chawla, who would then give it to the President's office. And as soon as we were about to enter the gate, they would see the numbers, and they would just wave us straight through in. In the second meeting, when Mr. Ashu Chawla was driving, they saw his face, and they just waved us in. I was always carrying my passport because, in case there is a requirement for an ID to be given at the residence, but I have no recollection of my ID ever being checked. I am not sure, but I'm quite certain there would be CCTV cameras there, which can clear, we can go back and check records of. And if the vehicle numbers were given, I'm sure there'd be a record of that as well, because there would be a security entry that's made somewhere. So I'm absolutely confident that, these meetings did take place. I attended those meetings, and the discussions were on the topics that I've said in the affidavit.
What has happened to a supplementary affidavit by him relating to the quotations in his statement?
Mr. Chairperson, from this morning, I got a sense that the Chairperson would like him to deal with all the quotations in the book or just the quotations in the statement.
Oh, well, one certainly in the statement.
Oh, yes.
But insofar as there is evidence in the book, there are contents of the book, or parts of the contents of the book, yes, that he has confirmed here.
Yes.
To the extent that any parts thereof are put in quotations, he must tell us
Yes.
whether those were quotations as we all understand them to
Yes.
say those were word for word. That's what the person said word for word, or
Yes.
whether it was something else.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So only insofar as it relates to what he has confirmed.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairperson, could he then be allowed time, maybe by next week, that we obtain the supplementary, or would the chairperson prefer to have
Well,
it?
that's
sooner?
fine.
Yes.
It can be delivered in due course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was hoping that it would have been done overnight, but to the extent that it involved the book, it might
Yes.
have required more time.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So that's fine. You can make arrangements for
For him
his
to deal with that.
supplementary affidavit to be delivered in due course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
That is the evidence. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Sundaram, thank you very much once again for having come to the commission to give evidence. We appreciate it. I will obviously at some stage weigh up and assess all the evidence, your evidence and the evidence of other witnesses, and make whatever findings I will believe should be made. But I thank you for the fact that you took the trouble and agreed to come all the way to try and assist the commission as much as you could. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman, sir, for giving me the opportunity to say something that I've been waiting for 6
Yes.
years to say.
Yes,
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this.
No, thank you very much, and you are excused.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sundaram. Mr. Chairperson, I would like to call the next witness, Mr. Josias Johannes Scott.
Do you want
Maybe-
5 minutes?
Yes, just to tidy up. Yes, thank
yes,
you.
okay.
Thank you very much.
I'll take a 5 minutes adjournment just
Thank
to allow the change. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Adjourn. You may proceed, Ms. Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we've placed before you Exhibit CC2, which is the statement of Mr. Josias Johannes Scott.
This exhibit will be Exhibit CC2. That's the file containing the statement by Mr. Josias Johannes Scott.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Josias Johannes Scott.
Scott, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I was checking whether it's Scots or Scott.
Or Scott, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Scott is the person that we mentioned when Mr. Sundaram was giving evidence as the senior sales representative of the SABC, and his evidence deals with the sale of the archival content of the SABC. May he be sworn in, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Please administer the oath of affirmation.
Please raise it as high as you can. Please state your full names for the record.
Josias Johannes Scott?
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear that all the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
Help me God.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You may proceed.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Scott, before you, you have a bundle. It's marked Exhibit CC2. If you turn to page 1 of that bundle, you will see that it's a sworn affidavit. Is that your affidavit?
That's correct.
Yes, and if you
That's
turn
correct.
to page 14, I beg your pardon, to page 11 of that, is that your signature that appears at page 11?
My signature,
Yes, and
sworn under oath.
sworn under oath. And you did that on which date? 5th of October, or was it 10 May 2019?
On the 10th of May,
2019. And are the contents of this affidavit true and correct?
pardon?
Are the contents of the affidavit true and correct?
100% correct.
Yes,
And
thank you.
true.
Yes. Can we just tell the chairperson that you were once employed by the South African Broadcasting Corporation, the SABC? Could you tell the chairperson when and when did you join the SABC?
I joined the SABC in 1995, and I was called into the office of the General Manager, Human Resources, on the 13th of April last year, being on contract for 25 years nearly. And he said to me, "Sir, sorry, we're not going to renew your contract. You're too white and you're too old." So I left the end of April last year.
All right. Can we take it step by step, all right? When you first joined the SAB, in what capacity were you employed?
I joined them as salesperson in the Content Enterprises Department until 2009. I joined them in 1995 during the Rugby World Cup. And Mr. Snooky Sigalala in 2009 felt that news archive footage should fall under news and generate money income for news. So Content Enterprises then got split. They were only allowed to sell programming, and a new department called News Agency was formed to sell all news content footage. And I joined them in 2009 when they started off.
Yes. And then what was the actual position that you held in that department?
What was he?
The position that you
I
held?
was senior sales representative.
Yes. And how many were you in that department?
Including an intern, 4, excluding the intern, 3, myself, a lady who was the administrator, and an agent who also sold news items to the public.
Yes. So what was the role of a senior sales representative?
Well, basically, to help broadcasters and production houses to get the correct footage when they made programs for the SABC or any other company, and to make sure that they receive the correct footage, and also to avoid all copyright issues.
Yes. The investigators of the commission, as you know, had approached you and you had to depose to this affidavit to deal with a certain aspect or a particular sale of the archival content. Am I right?
When I got approached by
Yes.
ANN7,
Yes.
or at that stage it was Infinity Media, no. Mr. Nazim Hoa came to see me, a real gentleman. He sat down and we discussed how archives work, and I explained to him, we do not transfer any material on behalf of outside clients. Because if they're not happy, we've wasted our time and our tapes and everything. You will have to make somebody available from your offices to come and select what you want. And he was talking in general, what one would need to start a television station.
All right.
And I said, Nazim, I'm prepared to help you people. What's historical? The SABC started off in 1979.
Yes.
Prior to that, African mirror footage. So there's nothing historical about SABC footage whatsoever.
All right. Just a minute, please, Mr. Scott.
Judge, he might turn around and say to me, but what about the release of Nelson Mandela? That's not historical.
Yes.
And doesn't belong to the SABC alone. It belongs to, well, as a matter of fact, Reuters, ITN, has got far better footage of the release of Nelson Mandela than the SABC.
Yes. Mr. Scott, just
Sorry?
a minute. Yes, just a minute, please. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairperson, Mr. Scott has indicated that he's hard of hearing, so we might just have slight problems.
Okay, no, that's
yes.
fine.
Yes, thank you. Just, how did Mr. Hoa get to know about you, or how did that meeting between the two of you happen?
I got a call from the secretary of the acting CEO at that stage, Mr. Claudi Motsoneng, and she said to me, "Yes, Claudi would like to see you."
Yes.
I said, "When?" She said to me, "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock." So the next morning, 9 o'clock, I went up to his office. He was not there. He got stuck in traffic in Sandton, and like everybody knows me, I do not work Africa time. If appointment's for 9 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock, not 9:05. I turned around and I said, "Do me a favor. I'm not going to waste the SABC's time and my time. I'm going back to the office. When he arrives, phone me."
Yes.
I was basically on my way down to my office when he phoned me, and he apologized and he said to me, "Sorry, I'm late, but I'm in the office now." So I went back to his office, and he wanted to know how the sale of archive material works. So I explained to him, you've got to do the research, you've got to transfer it from
Yes,
original to copy.
Sorry, Mr. Scott, let's take that process slowly, because you deal with that process in paragraph 7 onwards of your statement. Just
Okay.
describe it slowly to the chairperson. How does that process work?
Okay, let me start from
Yes.
the beginning. I explained to him the process. I want an email from the client requesting material. The client must tell me exactly what the material will be used for, Then I will quote the client, and if the client accepts the quotation, then only will I go further by doing research on what the client wants, and then arrange for the client to come in and select the material. Our conversation lasted about 10 minutes maximum. And he said to me, "Sounds expect a call from someone who needs footage." And that's the last I've heard from Mr. Motseneng about the deal with ANN7. And I can't recall if it was the same afternoon or the next day that Mr. Houba phoned me, asked to see me, made an appointment. He came in about the next day, I would say. We sat in my office and we discussed the whole process. And I then emailed him a quotation, which he accepted. And I would say about 3 days later, a gentleman by the name of Rahul was sent to me to start selecting the material. And in the meanwhile, the fourth person who was an intern, I managed to get appointed permanent. Maloko, very, very bright gentleman. He did his master's in between doing his internship. I don't know how he managed to do it, but he did it.
Is that Mr. Moloko Maserumule?
Maserumule.
Yes.
Yeah. He then started to work permanently in the news agency department, and I explained to him what Nazim wanted, and I said to Moloko, as per all our clients, you're going to sit with whoever comes in. I'll help you with research, draw the tapes, make sure that if the appointment is 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock he starts. The tapes must be ready, and Rahul from AN7 kept his time on the spot, always arrived on time, like Moloko, and they started to work.
Yes. Let's just go back slightly. You haven't told the chairperson what is it that Mr. Hoa said to you he wanted. You haven't described exactly the content that he actually wanted.
Mr. Hoa said to me, "Sias, can you help us with material to start off a new channel in South Africa?" And I immediately said to him, "Nazim," and at that stage, the late Nelson Mandela was very sick. I said to him, "You cannot go on air without material of Mr. Nelson Mandela." And he agreed. I also said to him, "You cannot start a channel if you do not have good visuals of all the major cities of South Africa. Pretoria, Bloemfontein, Cape Town, Durban, and you name it." And he agreed. And Marikana was quite in the press at that stage. I said to him, "Marikana footage we've got." And he said to me, "Yes, any riots, any protest, and you name it." That was basically what we discussed.
So he wanted a wide range of
A
material.
wide range of footage, not only, as a matter of fact, it would have been a pleasure if he asked me 2,000 minutes of Nelson Mandela only, because we've got over 2,000 minutes of Nelson Mandela. Starting with tape 4575, which is the release of Nelson Mandela, 4589, his speech, Grand Parade speech, going on over on 4590, and then the next one would be Madiba arriving in Soweto. Not much of that, only the Orlando Stadium speech. The next week he spoke at Kingsmead in Durban, Vrye Weapons in the Sea.
Yes. So then, after he then told you exactly what he wanted, then you had an idea of,
I had a good idea of
what he wanted.
of what to research for, and you name it. And I also said to him, Nazim, do me a favor. You people discuss it between you. Tell Rahul or whoever comes in to bring me a list of what you think you want. And whilst he's here working on the other stuff, I'll do the research and make sure the tapes are there.
Yes.
I never received a list from them. They depended on me completely.
Yes. And so then, so this happens before there's negotiations about how much they're going to pay, how much is it going to cost them, because you have no idea of the content that they wanted.
Advocate, let's put it this way. There was no difference in price between what type of content a production house or a broadcaster wanted. The price would have remained the same. It's used for broadcast purposes. Whether they wanted Marikana or Madiba footage or Winnie footage or doesn't matter. The price would have remained the same per minute.
Yes. Can we go to page 17 of that, of your statement? It will be under a divider marked 3.
And it's 3.
Yes.
You mean paragraph 17?
Yes, advocate.
said
I beg your
page
pardon,
17.
page 17, Mr. Chairman. Yes, under item, the divider marked number 3. It's annexure JJS 3. It's called, what is that, Mr. Scott? Have you found it? Are you there?
Sorry?
Have you found it? Have they found the document?
Number 3, yes.
Yes. What
the
is
price
it?
guide.
It's a price guide. Is that the price guide of the SABC?
It's a price guide for the sale of stock footage.
Yes. Could you just highlight what the prices that are relevant for the transaction that we are talking about?
Your Honourable, I want to start off by pointing out there's a price guide and not a set price list. 1.1a, R100 per minute of footage transferred and taken away. That's a standard price which we've asked. If you walk in and you want to buy 10 minutes, you would have paid R1,000 plus VAT.
Yes. All right. Okay, let's look at the next one. What is that for, that 500 Rand per hour?
Okay, it was agreed from B to D to waive it. And it was also agreed between Jimmy Matthews and myself to deviate from R100 per minute to R70 per minute.
Yes. Yes, we're not there yet. We're getting to that. But I just want you to explain to the chairperson. You've told us the 100 Rand per minute if you transfer and you take away. What is the 500 Rand per hour?
Okay, the 500 Rand per hour, Your Honourable, is basically if a client comes in, and we had that a lot of times, that somebody would come in, sit in front of a monitor, waste 2, 3, 4 hours in the edit suite, and don't pay. So the 500 Rand per hour part thereof was to use the edit suite of the SABC.
Okay.
That was a technical charge to use it, because you've got to remember there's 2 machines.
Yes.
There is a machine that copy, and then there's a machine where you put your master tapes in.
Okay.
So you needed 2 machines. And the 500 Rand was to copy from tape, master tape to copy tape.
To copy tape. All right. And then if I come to the SABC and I'm the one who wants material, and I would come and sit down with you or Mr. Masarumule, So for the time that I've come in there and I'm sitting and I am copying the material from the master tape onto the copy tape, so you would charge for that time. That's what the 500 rand is
That's
for.
correct.
Yes. All right. Then let's move on to the 150 rand per 10 items.
Clients would send in a list of 300 items, which I think they might need. To do research on 300 items takes a little bit of time. So we try to restrict them to be specific by charging them 150 rand per 10 items, or part thereof.
Yes. All right. So this is all stuff that would go onto the invoice.
That's
Yes.
all technical costs.
All technical costs. And then you've got then in D.
D,
Yes.
in the case of ANN7, they brought in their own copy tapes, but if a client wants the material on a DVC Pro format, then we charge 150 rand and we provide a copy, or the SABC provide a copy.
All right. And then we deal in EFG with copyright. Could you explain to the chairperson what these costs are for?
E, if a production company or anybody for that sake makes a program and it's being broadcast on the SABC only, then we charge less for copyright. We charge 750 rand per 30 seconds. If the client walks in, a dominee walks in, says, I saw this beautiful church service about 10 years ago on TV. I would like to show it to my congregation. Can I have a copy, please? I will then explain to him it's audio-visual presentation. In other words, you show it to more than one person, and you're going to have to pay 500 rand per 30 seconds copyright. Okay, then we get to the money side of it. Copyright. Opposition broadcasters, NCA, DSTV, Al Jazeera, in this case, ANN7 as well,
Yes.
we would charge 2,000 rand per 30 seconds copyright.
So these are your competitors?
That is our competitors.
Yes. All right. And
And
then
carte blanche,
Yes.
the only reason why they paid more, 2,750, is because they stream all the carte blanche programs. And I charge them 750 rand per 30 seconds more to put it on YouTube or wherever they like to.
yes. And you've got different pricing for overseas broadcasters.
Pardon?
You have different pricing for overseas broadcasters.
Yeah, overseas broadcasters, we quote it into US dollar or euro or pound, depending on, where the broadcasters are from.
Yes. And but for the purposes of your testimony, these are not relevant. Am I right?
Sorry?
For the purposes of your evidence, the overseas prices are not relevant.
No, definitely
Yes.
not.
And then if you turn over the page, at page 18, you have advertising use. Was that relevant to AN7?
No.
Okay. And
No, Nazim explained to me that they're going to use it in South Africa only, and there was no reason to doubt him. As far as I know, nobody has told me or showed me otherwise. As far as I know, they only used our footage in South Africa.
yes.
Ms. Norman,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
don't you need from this witness only what were the terms of the arrangement between SABC
Yes.
and ANN7, if he knows them? What was the norm? What were the normal terms?
Yes.
Was there a deviation from those terms? how much deviation was there? What was the justification for the deviation, if any?
Yes,
Do
we
you
get
need
yes.
anything more than that?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Let's get there.
Let's just get that. All right.
Let's get there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
We-
you. Especially because
we
he's struggling
are
to hear
going
me.
too much roundabout.
Yes,
Let's get
yes.
to it.
All right. Thank you. Now, then Mr. Howard comes to you, and then you said you gave him a quotation. What was the quotation that you gave him?
With?
You gave him a quotation.
Yeah, I gave him a quotation only after I had a chat to our CE, Chief Executive of News, Jimmy Matthews. And I said to him, Jimmy, I was excited because we've never sold 2,000 minutes of footage to one client. And I knew it was going to be a big deal. And we chatted and chatted and chatted, and we decided, okay, fine. Instead of charging 100 Rand per minute, we're going to charge 70 Rand per minute. Okay. Went back and I emailed him, Nazim Hova. I said to him, this is the best I can do. And he came back and he said, accept it.
Yes. And then what about the 500 Rand for...
No, that we waived.
Okay.
We decided not to charge it, because if I had to add that, I would have chased them away completely.
All right. Can you just try and
But what was wrong with that? Wasn't your job
sorry?
Wasn't your job to charge according to the price guide? Was your job not to charge according to the price guide?
It was, Your Honourable, but if I do get the permission from whoever is in charge of overall news, and Jimmy said, let's waive it.
And what reason did Mr. Matthews advance for saying that 500 Rand per hour should be waived?
So I've got a hearing problem.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was told you do have a hearing problem. Let me try and raise my voice. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit better.
Okay, maybe let me bring the mic closer. Zonaka, this mic still can't come closer. You must make arrangements. Let's see if I pull it. You see. You must. What was the reason that Mr. Matthews gave as to why you should waive the 500 Rand per hour?
Your Honourable, there was no reason given whatsoever. We chatted about the size of the deal, and I can recall him even saying it's going to be a big job.
That's a big job from the side of SABC.
Well, and the big job became my big job, but it was part of my work which I had to do at any event. No reasons was given. Quite frankly, you know, I think anybody in that position would have done it.
Would have
Done what Jimmy did.
Yes. Why do you say that?
At that stage, what goes through one's mind? You've got 140,000 Rand immediately. If you finish the 2,000 minutes at 70 Rand per minute, why worry about additional 40,000 Rand? Get the 140,000 Rand in ASAP.
But was there a request from the client for the 500 Rand to be waived?
If I've got copies of all the packing slips, I can work out that we did not lose all that much money. Rahul did not come in any day. So not all those many hours were spent in the edit suite. What we did was Moloko would park the tapes where he would start and select from. So
Okay, no. The question was there a request from the client for the
No.
500 rand to be
no,
waived?
not at all.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, thank you. Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I thought she was saying something else. Now, if we take, from what you had described earlier, because they didn't give you a list of what they wanted, so it would mean that when Mr. Rahul comes and meets with Mr. Moloko, Mr. Siramurule, they would have to sit down and sift through the content that they wanted,
View and transfer.
view and transfer. So that would have taken hours, am I right?
That couldn't have taken them more than 40 hours in total. Africa, you've got to
Yes.
remember, they only took away 33 hours in total.
Yeah.
33,03 hours in total. That's what they took away.
Yes.
1,982 minutes. That would give you 33,03 hours. You transfer a minute transfer to a minute. So it would have taken them, tape might stop, eject the tape, put a new tape in, that would waste a little bit of time. 33 hours wouldn't have taken them more than 45 hours maximum.
Yes, but the 33 hours multiplied by 500 would have still have been a good revenue for the
Oh,
SABC.
33 hours, that would have been 16,500.
Yes. Do you regard that as insignificant?
Pardon?
Do you regard that amount as insignificant?
Well, instead of losing a deal, you know, I regard that amount as minor, really.
But who said you were going to lose a deal?
When Mr. Howard came to see me, he was talking about there's not much money, you know, and difficult times and all that.
But he never asked for a discount.
Pardon?
But he never asked for a discount. He never asked for you to waive anything, isn't it?
No, you're quite right.
So,
We did give it
yeah, without being asked.
without him being asked.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you then conclude an agreement with him, other than the quotation that you spoke about? Was there an agreement that was concluded between the SABC and ANN7?
Advocate, I cannot recall 100% if there was a legal binding contract or if we only worked on the emails as an agreement.
All right, let's just talk about that. Who would have referred, because I understand you have a legal department, am I right? Who would have referred these terms that you agreed on with Mr. Howard to the legal department for them to draft an agreement? Whose responsibility was it?
It was quite a big department, and if you request a contract, would be referred to one of the legal people who's not all that busy. Quite a couple of people could draw up the contract.
Yes, but who must take the first step that please draw up a contract?
My department had to take the first step.
Yes. Did your department do that?
I cannot recall where we did or not.
Okay. But as you are sitting there now, have you been able to locate from the time you sold to AN7 till today, that is, although you're out of employment now, have you ever been able to locate a contract upon which you said, those are the terms of the contract, and this is how things were going to be done?
Since this thing started, Advocate, I have not approached the SABC for anything. The good work was done by Dr. Anthony, and all the copies of stuff which you see here was done by your investigator.
Yes.
I did not approach the SABC for anything.
before you left, but did you ever have sight of an agreement?
Quite frankly, before I left, state capture, being called to the state capture, that was the last thing on my mind. I saw a small article in the newspapers about the book, and I think it was a Bild newspaper stating that they've got footage for a hamburger and a beer. And I forwarded that to Morocco, and Morocco came back, ha, 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 ha.
Yes, I think we must take the
I think
adjournment.
so, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, when we
we'll
come
try and
back,
be
we
short
need to try and wrap up.
shorten yes,
Yeah,
we'll do that, thank you.
yeah. We'll take the lunch adjournment,
Yes.
and we will come back at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
We
Thank you, Mr.
adjourn.
I don't. One, you are a professional. Serious.
Yeah, Bo. Okay. Okay, sharp, sure. Hmm?